Hey everyone, welcome to the Distribution Optimization webinar. Today we're going to discuss how the industry has leapt into content distribution, but that one of the biggest challenges for marketers is understanding how to distribute effectively. What metrics matter, how you ensure you're getting real clicks, and how do you minimize waste. First up, I'll just take you through a little bit of an agenda so we can look at what we're going to discuss today. We're going to give you a bit of an introduction to Ben and myself, who's on the call today, and Nudge. And then we're going to talk through how we think about distribution. After that, we'll look at how you guys can set up a campaign for success. We'll also talk about top tips during the campaign and some of those common mistakes to avoid, and really the one KPI to focus on for your campaigns. So, first up, my name's Holly Blue-Allen. I'm the VP of Accounts at Nudge. Throughout my career, I've worked for publishers, agencies, networks, and now product. And at each place, I specialised in content, so either selling it at publishers and networks like Vice and Protein, or running native campaigns at an agency for my clients. I also, whilst at that agency, ran distribution for my clients with a focus on always on social and optimization. And this has given me a really good understanding of the struggles of native content across all levels, from content to then that distribution. And now I specialise in native at Nudge, where I look after sales and account success. And I'll hand you over to Ben.
Hey, my name is Ben Young, and I'm the CEO here at Nudge. And a little bit of my background: I'm the co-founder of a digital agency in New Zealand, and there I've worked across hundreds of campaigns, and now I'm sitting on the product side. I've always been involved in content. I've been a blogger since the term was invented, I think formally for the last 8 years. I've always been an advocate for content marketing distribution, and I led the charge in bringing Nudge to the US. We were really focused on helping native content scale through transparency and efficiency. And for those of you that subscribe, I'm the voice behind This Week in Native Ads. And so the common thread here is, since I guess this industry was born, I've been playing and tinkering around with it, sitting on the client side, but now on the product side. And so today I wanted to start off with just talking about some of the problems we're hearing in the market, and that's what instigated us to do this webinar, but also to help inform some of our product. And so one of the things we're hearing is that people feel like they're getting thousands of clicks to only get half a dozen real users.
Yeah, this is definitely something we see definitely clients talking about a lot. We were working on a campaign recently, well, before we started working on a campaign, and a client had come to us and said, look, they were getting heaps of high reach to the site, but when they were looking at what people were doing on the content afterwards, or if they signed up to anything, the quality was so poor. And so it's so important that, of course, these clicks are actually driving real quality users to the site.
And then I was chatting with a marketer 2 weeks ago, and he was like, Ben, my gut feeling is the clicks aren't real. He's like, I know that they are, but I'm getting a lot of thousands of clicks through to my content, but I'm not seeing the end result that I normally see from that volume of clicks.
Yeah, that's something actually. We were working on a consumer product campaign for an agency, and that was one of the biggest reasons actually for bringing Nudge on, was that they were going, great, I've got this distribution that's running, or I'm trying something, but I don't know that it's actually working for me, and so I can't actually, say to the client, this is working, we need to invest more in this, and it's so important that you understand, what's happening afterwards.
I mean, this high reach at the sacrifice of low quality, or hitting the reach numbers, but not your, I guess, follow-on KPIs.
Yeah, this is definitely something I see everyone, concerned about. So I think this is a challenge for everyone, really, from publishers, brands, agencies. Reach is something that we've all become so focused on, right? We need to get that high reach through to this, to the content. A lot of the time, that's what you're guaranteed against a certain amount of views. And then what happens is you get those views, but you did it just based maybe on getting in the cheaper cost, or you weren't, you just needed to get them. But then when you look at what happened after you got the poorer quality through, it affected all those other metrics that you were also going to be KPI'd on. So high attention, engagement, maybe conversions. And so it's really important that you see those two parts together.
Yeah, I think overall there's just a bit of a lack of transparency around what's happening. Like, people are going, why is there suddenly a massive interest on my content on mobile? Or why am I getting traffic from China for a US campaign?
Yeah, never good. Yeah, I think again, this is something I think, right through, through everyone involved in this, brands sometimes aren't sure, they're going, great, I'm running all these different native campaigns, but I don't really understand what's the best in terms of maybe driving high attention or conversions, like all of those parts. But then agencies are also running campaigns and they're, kind of going, great, well, that worked, but I don't know why that worked. And then taking that through to the publisher, a lot of the times those teams are sat in different parts. So maybe the person who's reporting on the campaign is not actually the one optimizing the media, which means that then you don't really know what you should be doing during the campaign. So I think there's sort of a general lack of transparency across the market.
And I think, worst of all, the way that we've been measuring is with antiquated metrics. And this is really what helped us instigate Nudge. Like, metrics haven't kept pace for how we consume content today. For example, this morning you probably woke up, picked up Facebook on your phone, clicked on a few links, read them, and hit the back button. That's not how we used to discover content. It used to be 10 years ago you would visit the homepage of a website and click your way through. But now we visit via customized feeds. We swap devices from tablet to iPhone to desktop and anything in between in a given hour. And on our desktops right now, we have multiple tabs open. So the way that we consume content has changed a bit. We tend to hunt and peck, and we're very liberal with the back button, and we change devices throughout the day. And so before we kind of get into some of our tips for optimizing distribution, we wanted to frame up some of the context of how we look at this problem and what really got us here. And so if we rewind a few years ago, Holly and I were working at an agency in New Zealand, and we were working on a whole lot of campaigns on behalf of our clients, helping them understand what was working in terms of content, but also what distribution was working. And so not finding many tools in the market for this idea of when content turns into advertising and we're distributing it, we built Nudge as a solution to help clients navigate through, I guess, the native advertising industry. And the core of our product is really, it's a mixture of social metrics, advertising metrics, and content metrics, all with the view of helping streamline native advertising internally at your company. And so over time, we've been in the US market for the last 3 years. We've developed a number of different tools to help savvy marketers navigate and orchestrate their spends.
Cool. I'll just jump in here on this one just to give you a bit of an understanding of those features. So in Nudge, as Ben was talking through, we really started by focusing on the content measurement for brands, agencies, and publishers. And so apart from those real-time, behavioral metrics, we also surfaced things like traffic sources, benchmarks, insights. We looked at attribution measurement. And based on our clients' campaigns, we found that they were actually coming to us and asking for recommendations on what traffic they should be buying, what metrics they should be focusing on, and what their KPIs should be. And so with that in mind, we launched Nudge Distribute to help our clients with not only reach, but quality. And so I'm going to take you through just a couple of top-line metrics because I'm going to talk about them a lot. So I think it's probably going to be really helpful just to understand that we're all on the same page with these metrics. So within the Nudge dashboard, when you first log in, what you'll actually see is metrics like people and impressions, which is clearly the reach. We also measure things like, social engagement, so shares, and if those shares are bringing people back to the content, if the content has any virality, and what that social engagement's looking like as well. But a metric that I'm going to talk about a lot is average attention minutes. And so the reason that we use average attention minutes rather than time on page is that kind of like how Ben was discussing at the beginning. If you think about how we discover content these days, we're not going to one site generally and clicking through the entire portfolio of content. We're discovering things through feeds. And so if you're using metrics like time on page, you're not really understanding what people are doing in your content because you might find that someone spent 4 minutes time on page on the site. That's probably not likely they did because it's only counting users who click through to that second page on the website. So with average attention minutes, we look at the time people are actively consuming the content on that page. They can then hit the back button and we're still going to count that. So it's a much more accurate understanding of how people are consuming your content. And when we go through to the second one, what I'll show you is really a little bit of a start of this distribution optimization part. So another thing we show you within the dashboard is how these people have arrived, at the content. Because of course, we need to understand where people came from, but we need to not waste any of those clicks. And so a big focus for us is post-click metrics. So great, here are your sources, you're going to know your cost per clicks, your click-through rates, but you need to understand some of those other metrics. What are they actually doing when they get onto the content? Because only then can you really understand the optimization that might be needed. So we'll look at the people that came through, we'll look at the average attention minutes, which we just spoke through, and then we'll look at something called a bounce rate. Now, again, I'll just take a minute on this because I'm going to talk about it a lot. A bounce rate is a little bit different within Nudge than it is editorial for an editorial metric. So an editorial bounce is someone who doesn't click through to a second page on the website. But for example, if we're distributing one piece of content and someone's clicked through and read that piece of content for 2 minutes and then they left the page, they didn't bounce, they did their job. So we look at something called a native bounce, and that looks at the percentage of people who leave the page before it fully loads. So all of a sudden now you can really get an understanding of how your sources are working. So if we were to take a look at this version, what we could immediately see is, okay, well, this person put a little bit of budget behind Bing, not much yet clearly, a little bit behind Bing and a little bit behind Google Paid. Well, wait a minute, I can clearly see here that people from Bing, there was, people spending an average of 0.18 attention minutes, and 71% of people were leaving the page before it fully loaded, as opposed to the Google Paid, where we were seeing 0.6 attention minutes and a much lower bounce rate of 29%. And so those post-click metrics just really allow you to understand exactly the quality of each of those sources. And really, actually, with that in mind, a good example of this is that we measured a campaign for Athena Health, which is a cloud-based health software program, and they had bought content actually across the Atlantic, and they wanted to understand all those behavioral metrics, but they also wanted to understand were people actually converting, and by converting what that meant was were people going and filling out one of 4 different lead forms on their site. And so what we were able to let them know is not only what content was driving the most conversions, but a media source that was actually accounting for 35% of all conversions. So it really helps you back that winner, back the winner, and improve efficiency during your campaign.
And so success begins at the start of your campaign. What we find time and time again is being smart here enables you to be smart during and at the end of your campaign. And so today we're going to take you through some of the top tips for how to set up your campaign for success. And so the first one we always recommend is to try 2 or 3 different partners. There are a lot of providers in the market, and they all serve ads slightly differently, employ slightly different bidding models, and have different inventory. So we always recommend to try 2 or 3 if possible, because this allows you to see the different results and helps you contextualize performance.
Yeah, and just to jump in on that, I would really recommend trying, keep trying different ones, especially as you're running campaigns within different categories, different brands. We'll run campaigns and we'll see differences again and again, between what's working the best. So it's really important that you keep trialing these different partners.
And the next one is to look at the organic insights when you're setting up your campaign targeting.
Yeah, so this is one I'm pretty passionate about. So we were measuring a campaign for a food and drink client. And what they did was, they looked at some of the organic insights. They also did a really small amount of distribution, just to start with, to put a couple of $100s behind a few sources, because they really wanted to understand what was working before they invested the budget. And so immediately there, you can see by that screen grab that, mobile was actually driving almost double the amount of attention as desktop was. But it didn't really stop there. What they were also able to find out was that I think they had about 4 pieces of content that they were, looking to promote, and one piece was getting, I think almost triple the amount of attention, and high social engagement, and that social engagement was bringing in a bunch of organic reach as well. So great, now we know that piece of content that we're really focused on. But also the time of day when people are most people are coming through to the content. Okay, they found out it's between, I think, 6 to 9 p.m. at night. And then they could also see that a paid Facebook promoted post they put, a couple of $100 behind was driving, I think, an average of 2.9 average attention minutes. So immediately it meant at the very beginning of their campaign, before they'd even really put that budget in, they could take those organic insights, put it behind put the distribution budget behind the right piece of content with, the right device, targeting it in the evening and putting it behind that Facebook post. So it just really allowed them to put all of that together to make sure the campaign was a success from the get-go.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of a no-brainer, but for some reason we forget when we're setting up the distribution campaigns. And so, yeah, this is just a little nudge so that you keep doing it. And then the next one is breaking out the campaigns. So when you're setting up your distribution campaigns, think about setting it up into different buckets if you're using vastly different targeting parameters. Like, for example, break it out by device. If you're using different audiences and interests, make sure you break out those campaigns. And the reason that you do that is it allows you to fine-tune the campaign as you go a lot more efficiently. Whereas if you've got all of yours set up in one campaign, it's going to be hard to remove what's not working. And this is something we recommend. Like, as you go through the campaign, you want to turn off what's not working and reallocate that spend to that that's working the best.
Yeah, and I think on that one we see so many people not do this at the beginning and sort of just group everything together, but then they'll realize halfway through the campaign that they're not actually able to break out any insights from that. And the earlier you can do this, the better those learnings are going to get, which kind of, I think, leads us into the next one.
It's one of your favorites.
Yeah, and I know I get slightly obsessive over it, but it's really about over tagging your campaigns. And so this is something that we see, especially, for example, agencies, maybe when they're booking sponsored content campaigns, or maybe a brand who's maybe doing some distribution, and they kind of just group everything together. So they'll go, okay, this is my Outbrain campaign, and this was the social campaign, and this was the publisher's distribution, and they just group everything together. But not all of those different sources are going to work, as well. And so, if we look at this example, okay, we can see they've got a mix of social, got a mix of publisher, and they've got two different Outbrain campaigns set up. Okay, well, immediately I can see that the publisher distribution is performing really well. One has maybe a slightly lower bounce rate. But I can see that the Facebook one is performing like double the amount of attention as Twitter and has a lower bounce rate. And then if we were to look at the Outbrain campaign, immediately there I can see, well, technology is performing much better, getting almost an average of 0.8 attention minutes and, a much lower bounce rate with only around 20% leaving the page before it loaded. So I'd immediately go, great, I'm going to put my budget behind the promoted Facebook post. Publisher can continue as normal, and I'm going to move all of my Outbrain budget behind that technology targeting. And having that information during the campaign, even though it is a bit of a pain, I'll be honest, when you're setting things up, just over tag. The quicker you do it at the beginning of the campaign, the more you're going to be able to optimize.
And that leads you in nicely into how to optimize during the campaign. Once you've put in that groundwork, what can you do during your campaign to really fine-tune your investment? And so the first one is like, have you ever accidentally clicked an ad? I mean, I certainly have. And with Nudge, something that's really neat is you can identify accidental clicks based on how fast people are leaving your content. And if people are doing that in volume, that's wasted money because you've paid for each and every one of those clicks. And so that's right. We had a recent example with a finance campaign in Asia Pac, and they were getting a lot of clicks that were very expensive, but people were leaving straight away. And what they're able to do is readjust their spend away from those targeting parameters so that they could get a better return on investment.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this is something we see, unfortunately, you do see it because it's just the truth, not all clicks are created equally, and sometimes that budget does need to be moved. And so we'll see that again and again. And that's, I think, one of the biggest watch outs for people, during a campaign, what you need to optimize for. Obviously, attention, you want to make sure you are driving high attention on the content. But when you start seeing those bounce rates coming over about, 40, 45, creeping up, it might be great that you got 20, 30,000 people through from that source. But if 66, unfortunately, I think we've seen some with 77, 80% leaving the page before it loads, what's really the value of that? It's not really helping you with the rest of your campaign. So it's a really good watch out to keep an eye on that bounce rate during the campaign.
And that leads nicely into this one, which is don't be afraid to shift spend. Remember, if part of your campaign is getting a lot more consumption, shift the spend where it's not getting consumption over to that. So feel free to turn off devices or adjust devices, adjust the targeting, see what's working, or shift your budget to the content that's performing the best. Because each day that you leave it, you're only really wasting money.
Yeah, and I have to, this is I think this is one of the insights that we always look out for really early on, because we've seen so much, such big differences. And we showed you that example before of, the devices. It's not always going to be desktop that's getting the highest attention. Sometimes it's going to be mobile. But I think that device type is, so essential. Being able to understand, okay, well, here's my traffic sources, and here's how long on desktop people were spending on the content versus mobile. Well, it's a no-brainer really then to shift that budget to drive, quality as well as that high reach.
Yeah, and we do kind of see this depends on every campaign, but we see some clients going, actually desktop is driving way higher attention for us. We're going to optimize towards that. But equally, we're seeing the same on mobile and often on tablet. So I guess be open-minded about it and just use the data to optimize.
Yeah, and we have on that actually, that device one. It's so funny. I mean, generally, I think a lot of the campaigns we measure are always like our tablet. That doesn't do so well. But then some campaigns you'll see that where I think we were measuring a campaign targeted towards new mums or something, and you were like, okay, wow, you could totally see that. They were getting on the tablets, in the evening after putting the babies to bed, and it's just so interesting. You'll see vast differences, and I don't think there's a this is the best device. It's so different for content, audience, brand, and so it's essential that you keep an eye on it for every campaign.
And this is a bit of a pro tip, and this is looking at attention by ad creative. We know that some ads are really effective at getting clicks, but are they effective at getting post-click engagement?
Yeah, this is a good example of that. So this was for a business campaign that we were measuring. And this was actually, we were doing something across Ads Native for this. And if you look at this, you can see the Get Your Free KPI Success Kit. It first started, we were like, yeah, that's great, it's bringing people in. And then we actually moved the budget away from it, because we could see that, yeah, it was getting people in it, and it was getting them in a cheap cost per click, because let's be honest, it's a bit clickbaity. But people were spending an average of 0.23 attention minutes, and almost 60% left the page before it fully loaded. Okay, well, already I can see just the KPI Success Kit was performing quite well, but immediately now I know the KPI Success Kit for your business, people were spending almost an average of 2 attention minutes, and only 6% were leaving the page before it fully loaded. That's almost, organic level in terms of attention and bounce. And so if I had just grouped all of that together, I'd have been like, yeah, it's performing okay. So it's not amazing, but it wouldn't have allowed me to take any learnings. And I think that's that biggest part. Sometimes you get to the end of your campaign and you go, okay, this provider worked really well. Well, what worked well? What headline worked well? Was what exactly was it that was working? And having that broken out. And I think a good example of that is we've seen agencies do this recently more and more. And some of the results they've gotten from this it allows them really early on to optimize, which means that budget's so well spent for the rest of the campaign.
And so that leads into common mistakes that we see happening. And if something here seems obvious, the reason it's obvious is because it's easy, and it's also a common mistake. And so these are the things that we see time and time again, which can be easily fixed. And so the first one is sometimes brands are thinking about mobile for reach but not quality. Whereas, and we've drilled this in quite a bit, if people aren't engaging with your content, it's just wasted money. So always keep an eye on what you're getting after that click.
I think a good example of that is, and I think we'll probably talk about it a bit as well in a different section, but you might have a piece of content that might just not be right for that device. And if it's not right, people are telling you of that, and I think one of the biggest things is kind of that thing of we've started the campaign, we're getting high reach from it, and just assuming that it's okay. And sometimes you're getting, you might have groups, you may not have split it out by device, and so you might not be able to understand that. But yes, you might be getting a lot of reach in, but like you can see here, and we've seen, actually bigger differences than this, haven't we? We might have seen an average of 1.1 attention minutes on desktop and like sometimes 0.2, 0.3 on mobile. And so, that quality is so important, and it's so important that you make sure the devices that you're using, fit that piece of content and what people are doing on it.
This is a bit of a gripe of mine. Promoting on mobile for content that only works on desktop, and this happens surprisingly frequently, where either content hasn't been made for the specific device, or it's not rendering correctly, or it's loading a bit slow. So just a good check, make sure that when you're setting up your campaigns, that it is working on the devices that you're promoting it on. And so it seems really obvious, but it's always worth checking.
You know what? I think it's one of those things that we're like, yep, it's a no-brainer. Obviously everyone knows that. You would be surprised. So I think some good examples of this, if we're to go right into the actual kind of nitty-gritty of the kind of content we're referring to. For example, let's say you're doing distribution to maybe a piece of content that has a lead form on it. Okay, well, think about that lead form. What's the lead form like? If it's got like 12, 13 sections in it that I've got to fill out, I'm probably not going to do it on mobile. It might take me too long. I might have more likelihood to do it on desktop. Or if it's an interactive piece of content that's got a really, high load time or something like that. Or video content, what's that, what's happening on that. So it's just really important you think through all those parts at the beginning of the campaign.
And this one, too many click trackers. And so we know that brands and agencies are wanting to verify some of the clicks they're receiving by using click trackers. But the challenge is when you start stringing 2 or 3 together, it can sometimes take 10 or 20 seconds before a user gets to your content. And honestly, you're just going to lose them. You can shave off a lot of your clicks straight away by doing that. So there's no harm in using click trackers, but don't use too many, and be mindful of the performance for the end user.
Yeah, I think it's one of those sense checks. If you think about yourself, we're all impatient people, right? We've all got millions of things to be doing. If it's going to take too long to load, you're probably going to leave. And so it's just something to watch out for, and really test as soon as the campaign's live, and feel like you can test on different devices, because a lot of the time, you think you're all right, and then it's not until the campaign's launched, and then this does seem obvious. These are all the things that we have seen happen that have really affected the distribution of a campaign and the overall campaign performance. So though I know it's kind of like, yeah, I definitely not do that, it does happen time and time and time again. And so every campaign, these are the kind of things you just want to be like going, okay, have I thought about that? Because, we've all spent times where you've dug into things and gone, spent ages and then gone, this was the issue. And this is a lot of the times the issue.
And then finally, looking at waiting too long before checking. But once you get set up, make sure you get into the campaigns and optimize frequently.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of my big ones. And I think, it was something I mentioned at the beginning, that I came from the agency background, and I came from, a lot of the time doing sort of social media campaigns optimization. And so a lot of that was, so frequently, had to really be checking every day. And I think that's a lot of what we see sometimes, is that campaigns go live, and for whatever reason, the person just isn't checking it, in the 2-3 hours after it's gone live, 8-10 hours, 48 hours. These sort of things are so important, because immediately you're going to start seeing, oh, well, wow, okay, well, that piece of content's performing really well. That distribution source, this one's really doing badly. And so many times you've seen campaigns like that where someone's just taken a bit too long to log in, and they found one of those big issues where, wow, this source, we were getting so many clicks through, good cost per click, but actually 70% of people were leaving the page before it even loaded. Okay, you're just wasting budget. You need to move it, somewhere where it can actually work. And so really make sure you guys are checking, as soon as you can during the campaign.
Excellent. And then just another reminder that not all clicks are created equal. Think about the consumer experience for your distribution. If you're using mobile units or using desktop, if you're using recommendation units or in-feed units, just sense check that to make sure that if you were the end user and you were going through that engagement, would the journey or the content after the click make sense? Because that's going to allow you to maximize how much return you're going to get from that. And so, for example, we had a client which had a bit more of a directed lead flow, and so what they were finding was contextual native was working best for them rather than in-feed native, because they could target people reading about a certain topic and then pull them into their funnel. And so it's a final little sense check. And so that leads us into KPIs. If you're looking to optimize your distribution, are there any metrics which really help keep everything in a line? And what we've found time and time again is that there's one KPI that if you optimize towards this, you'll get the best possible outcome from your distribution that you can from your content. And so a little bit of a reminder that distribution can only do as well as your content can do itself. It can definitely provide an uplift through data and targeting, but if your content isn't performing by itself, distribution isn't really going to change that. But so when you're thinking about your distribution, you want to be thinking about how can I drive quality traffic that is performing as well as, if not better, than my organic traffic. And so we say you should aim for 70% of your organic attention as a KPI. So if on average you're getting 1 attention minute, aim for 0.7 attention minutes from your distribution. And this allows you to have an acceptable level of bounce and also get some scale from your distribution. And we have found clients, once they use this as a KPI throughout the campaign, then it can actually lift it. So distribution is pulling up their average attention.
Definitely. I mean, we've seen that. We saw that for an agency that used us in New York. They started doing that at the very beginning of the campaign. I think they brought content across, a few big publishers, but they were also doing their own distribution. And early on, they were kind of, they were looking at that 70% KPI, and then they made some optimizations because they'd done all their tagging and their device targeting and everything else. And over the next week, they were actually able to bring it up to around where their distribution was actually driving a little bit higher than the publisher's, attention. And so it was just really quickly, they went, great, that's what's working. We're performing right where we need to, actually a little bit better. We'll just put our budget behind what's working and just kind of check on it every 4 to 5 days and see how things are going from there.
And the irony is about this as a KPI. Facebook already uses this as a yardstick for your distribution. So in optimizing for the news feed, Facebook announced last year that they're looking at how long people are spending on your content. And since then, they've only continued to make more announcements that they are looking at optimizing towards attention and what people do on the content. So if you're not optimizing towards attention, you're already paying a premium on a cost per click basis. So if you focus on attention, you're definitely going to get an edge. And so that concludes today's webinar. I'll kind of take you through a quick summary, and then we'll jump into some Q&A. And so we've gone through why post-click metrics are important and how you're flying blind without them, how to set up your campaign for success, make sure you try multiple partners, leverage your organic insights, break out those campaigns, and make sure you over-tag them. For top tips during the campaign, identify accidental clicks, make sure that you shift spend based on device targeting and content, and then our pro tip was look at attention minutes by creative. It can make a big difference to your end result. And then some of the common mistakes, using mobile for reach but not quality, content that doesn't work on the device you're targeting, using too many click trackers, and not optimizing frequently enough, and finally, not considering the consumer experience. And we've just covered it, but the one KPI to focus on is aiming for 70% of your organic attention. And so before we get into the Q&A, I just wanted to touch on our role and how we can help. And so if you think about Nudge as your orchestration layer for native advertising, we can help you understand what's working the best, streamline that process of collecting the data, and then guide you using the data as to where you should adjust your spend. So whether that's from the real-time analytics and the industry benchmarks, to the insights, to attribution, understanding what's happening after your content. And so feel free to reach out to us to learn more. And so Holly and I, and I'm not sure if this is fortunately or unfortunately, but fortunately for you, we have worked across thousands of campaigns, and it's one of those things where we can forget the insights that we've learned. So we've set aside some time for Q&A, for any questions related to what we've discussed today or distribution in general.
Cool. Well, actually, we've already got 2 questions. So first up, we've got, how technically speaking does Nudge calculate average attention minutes or time on site? And is that predicted on visiting multiple pages like Google Analytics? And how about those single page visits? I'll jump in first, and then Ben, feel free. So this is actually something, the reason we built out the Nudge dashboard where we really wanted to focus on average attention minutes was because we didn't feel like time on page was giving us the metrics that we needed to actually optimize towards. So, when you look at those multiple pages like Google Analytics where you're going, okay, like time on page is only counting users who click through to that second page on the website, makes it so hard for any marketer who's actually optimizing the distribution at all, because you start optimizing towards the wrong things. So with average attention minutes, we calculate that based on the time people are actively consuming the content. Now, if they hit the back button, it doesn't matter, we've still counted it. If they go to a different tab, we stop counting, and when they come back, we restart that session, so that you are actually able to distribute, each piece of content effectively looking on that attention.
Yeah, and I think the way we measure attention is because we saw how people are consuming content. You want to be able to read content and hit the back button. And if you've read and engaged with the content, me as a brand, I've received value, and that was my objective. And so that's why we use that methodology.
Great. I've got one more question here. I can see this has got a Ben question written all over it. How correlated are attention minutes to conversion events?
So the first answer is, if you go to our website, you can download a case study kind of breaking this apart. And so if you're looking to optimize to conversion, attention is one of the best metrics for doing that. It's going to ensure that you have the highest conversion rate on your content. If you're looking to optimize towards the total number of conversions, you want to use another metric we have called virality, and that helps optimize the amount of free reach that you're getting on your content. And so the answer is it's highly correlated, and that's why it's useful as an interim metric to go, well, look, this helps us zoom in and really concentrate on performance so that we maximize the number of conversions. And it can also be useful as an interim KPI if you don't have a direct conversion result. Like, for example, you're doing a brand campaign and you want to see how persuasive your content is.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's it for all the questions now. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will make sure that all the slides will be available on the blog, and tomorrow we'll send you through a link. Feel free to share with your colleagues, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Give It a Nudge. And if you do have any follow-up questions, anything else you want to ask us about other metrics, Nudge, anything at all, just reach out to your Nudge account manager. Thank you very much.
Thank you.